Get this dirty little mongrel out of my sight before I have security throw him in the trash where he belongs. The burning sting of vintage Pinot Noir splashing across my face was nothing compared to the icy shard of betrayal that just pierced my chest, freezing the air in my lungs. My mother-in-law had not only ruined my son's 5th birthday party, but she had also just projected a paternity test onto the 60-inch ballroom screen, announcing to the entire elite of Manhattan that Leo was not a Sterling. You really thought you could pass off some street rat's spawn as the heir to a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire? I whispered the question to myself, but my eyes were locked on Richard, the man who had vowed to protect us, now standing there with a glass of scotch, watching my public execution with a bored expression. The crystal chandelier above seemed to spin as the murmur of the crowd grew into a roar of laughter. I wiped the red liquid from my eyes, trying to shield Leo behind my dress. My son did not cry. He never cried. His small hand gripped my thigh, his eyes calculating the distance to the exit like a trapped animal. Richard stepped forward, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the broken glass of the wine flute Victoria had thrown at me. He did not look at me. He looked at Leo with a disgust so profound it felt like a physical blow. "I knew it," Richard said, his voice smooth and cold, amplified by the microphone he was still holding. "I knew there was a reason he was so defective. A Sterling does not have heart defects. A Sterling is not weak." "Richard, please," I choked out, my voice trembling not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. "We did IVF. You were there. You signed the papers. This is impossible." "Nothing is impossible for a gold digger from the orphanage," Victoria sneered. Stepping up beside her son, she looked impeccable in her Chanel suit, a stark contrast to the red stain spreading on my white dress. "You thought you trapped us with that child. Elena, you endured my insults for 5 years. You swallowed your pride every time I called you trash. I always wondered why you didn't leave. Now I know. You were waiting for the trust fund to unlock at his 5th birthday." She was right about one thing. I had stayed. I had endured the hell of this marriage for 5 years, but not for the money. I stayed because Leo needed the platinum medical insurance that only the Sterling family provided. Without it, his heart treatments would cost thousands of dollars a day. I was a hostage to American healthcare, and they were the jailers. "But here is the funny part," Victoria continued, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She snapped her fingers. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Chloe walked in, my husband's personal assistant, the woman who had been wearing my jewelry for the past 2 years. She was holding the hand of a boy who looked exactly like a miniature version of Richard. "Meet Baron," Richard announced, his chest puffing out with pride. "My true son, my biological heir." Baron was chubby, his face flushed with arrogance. He was eating a chocolate bar and wiped his sticky hands on the tuxedo of a waiter as he passed. The crowd cooed at him as if he were royalty. "DNA doesn't lie," Richard said, pointing at the screen. "Baron is 99.9% Sterling, and that thing behind you 0. I looked at the screen. The numbers blurred. My mind raced back to the clinic 5 years ago, the sterile room, the procedure. "How?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Victoria leaned in close, so only I could hear. Her perfume smelled of expensive lilies and decay. "Because I swapped the samples. You stupid girl. I couldn't let a low-class orphan breed with my son. I paid a nurse to swap Richard's sample with a donor from the homeless shelter. I wanted you to give birth to a monster so Richard would have a reason to kick you out." My blood ran cold. She had orchestrated this. She had violated my body, my life, and my son's existence just to prove a point about social class. "You are sick," I hissed. You are a monster. I, I am a mother protecting her legacy. Victoria laughed. Stepping back, she raised her voice for the room to hear. Security, remove these trespassers and strip her. That necklace belongs to the Sterling family. Two burly security guards in dark suits materialized from the shadows. They didn't ask me to leave. One of them grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. Let go of me, I screamed, struggling as the other guard reached for my neck. He yanked the diamond necklace off, the clasp scratching my skin, leaving a burning red welt. The earrings, too. Chloe chirped from the stage, stroking Baron's hair. And the ring. I don't want her dirty skin touching my engagement ring anymore. The crowd cheered. These were CEOs, philanthropists, the pillars of New York society. They were watching a woman and a child being assaulted, and they were cheering like Romans at the Colosseum. Mom. Leo spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Pulses rising. 120. We need to leave. He was looking at his smartwatch. He wasn't looking at the people mocking him. He was monitoring his own heart rate. Get off her. I shoved the guard, adrenaline giving me a surge of strength. I snatched Leo up into my arms. We are leaving. You don't have to touch us. Make sure they don't take anything, Richard commanded, taking a sip of his scotch. Check her pockets. The guard grabbed my purse and dumped it onto the marble floor. My phone, my wallet, Leo's emergency medicine, everything scattered. He kicked the medicine bottle away. It skidded under a table. Oops, the guard grunted, a smirk playing on his lips. I lunged for the medicine, but the guard blocked me. He grabbed me by the back of my dress and shoved me toward the main doors. I stumbled, my knees slamming into the hard floor. Pain shot up my legs, but I tightened my grip on Leo. Oh, out! Victoria shrieked. And don't think you will get a penny of alimony. You violated the fidelity clause. You cheated on my son with a beggar. You leave with nothing. The heavy doors opened. The biting cold of a New York December night hit me like a physical wall. The guards pushed us out onto the concrete steps and slammed the doors shut. The muffled sound of jazz music and laughter faded behind the thick wood. Silence. Just the howling wind and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stood up, my knees bleeding, the cold seeping through my thin dress. The snow was falling heavily, covering the city in a white shroud. We had no coats, no money, no medicine. Mom, Leo whispered. His head slumped against my shoulder. Chest hurts. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my heart. Leo, look at me. His lips were turning blue, the stress, the cold. His heart couldn't take it. Help! I screamed at the closed doors. Somebody help. He needs a doctor. But the doors remained shut. The security cameras blinked red, watching us die. I looked around the empty street. Upper East Side mansions loomed over us like silent tombstones. No taxis stopped. I was shivering so violently I could barely hold my son. Hold on. Baby, Mom is here. Mom will fix this. I sobbed, rubbing his back, trying to transfer my body heat to him, but I was freezing too. My phone was inside. My wallet was inside. I was a ghost in the city I used to analyze. Leo's breathing became shallow. His small hand went limp in mine. No, no, no. I cried, falling to my knees in the snow. I hugged him tight, rocking back and forth. Don't leave me, please. Leo, you are all I have. A shadow fell over us. I looked up through my tears. A figure emerged from the alleyway next to the mansion. A man. He was wrapped in layers of dirty, mismatched coats. His hair was matted, his beard thick and unkempt. A beggar. He didn't smell like alcohol or urine, though. He smelled of rain and ozone. He knelt down in the snow beside me. He didn't say a word. He reached out a hand calloused, scarred, with dirt under the fingernails and touched Leo's neck. "Get away," I warned, though I had no strength to fight. "We don't have money." "He is in atrial fibrillation," the beggar said. His voice was not what I expected. It was deep, resonant, and commanded absolute authority. It was the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed, not a man who asked for spare change. He pulled a small, strange device from his ragged coat pocket. It looked like a bundle of wires and a battery, taped together with duct tape. "Hold him still," the beggar ordered. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "Resetting his rhythm, unless you want him to die in the snow while your husband toasts to his bastard son inside." He didn't wait for my permission. He pressed the makeshift device against Leo's chest. A soft hum, a click. Leo's body jerked once. Then, he took a deep, gasping breath. The blue tint began to fade from his lips. I stared at the beggar, my eyes wide. He pocketed the device and took off his outer coat, a heavy, wool trench coat that had seen better days, and wrapped it around Leo. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man looked up, under the matted hair. I saw a pair of eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and burning with a cold fury that matched my own. "Someone who knows exactly what it feels like to be thrown away by the Sterlings," he said. He stood up and extended a hand to me. "Come with me. If you stay here, you freeze. If you go with me, we burn them down." I looked at the closed doors of the mansion, then at the man's hand. I had nothing left to lose. I took his hand. The biting wind of the New York winter night felt like 1,000 razor blades slicing against my bare arms as I stumbled after the stranger. Clutching Leo's shivering body against my chest, my bare feet were numb, no longer registering the freezing slush of the alleyway, but the adrenaline pumping through my veins kept me moving. We descended a rusted metal staircase that spiraled down into the bowels of the city, leaving the glittering lights of the Sterling mansion far above us like a cruel, distant memory. "Careful," the beggar commanded, his voice echoing off the damp concrete walls. "Skip the third step. It is rusted through." I obeyed blindly, stepping over the gap into the darkness. The air grew warmer as we went deeper, replacing the crisp smell of snow with the scent of ozone, stale coffee, and something metallic that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I expected a sewer, a cardboard box, or a rat-infested tunnel. I expected the stench of despair. Instead, as the heavy steel door creaked open with a groan of protesting hinges, I was blinded by a soft, pulsating blue light. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes. The room was cavernous, a concrete bunker hidden beneath the city's infrastructure. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with rows of server racks, their cooling fans humming in a low, rhythmic drone that sounded like a sleeping beast. Cables snaked across the floor in organized chaos, connecting towers of scavenged hardware to a wall of monitors that flickered with streams of data. "Put him there." The man pointed to a cot in the corner, covered with a military-grade wool blanket. I laid Leo down gently. My son was pale, his breathing still shallow, but the blue tint had left his lips. The man, this beggar who lived inside a machine, shucked off his filthy outer coat, revealing a faded black t-shirt underneath that clung to a muscular frame surprising for someone living on the streets. "Don't touch anything else," he warned, moving to a workbench cluttered with soldering irons and microchips. "That server rack on your left is processing more data per second than the entire Sterling Pharmaceutical mainframe." "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice raspy. I wrapped my arms around myself. finally feeling the bone-deep chill now that the danger had momentarily passed. "Why do you have all this? Are you... are you a criminal?" He didn't answer. He picked up a bottle of water and a protein bar from a crate and tossed them to me. I caught them reflexively. "Eat. You are useless to your son if you pass out from hypoglycemia," he said, not looking up as he typed furiously on a keyboard that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster but modified with mechanical switches. "My son needs a hospital," I insisted. Cracking open the water, my hands shook so hard I spilled half of it on my dress. "He has a congenital heart defect. That device you used? It was a temporary fix. He needs medication." The man spun his chair around. The harsh blue light from the monitors illuminated his face. Under the grime, his jaw was sharp, his eyes intelligent and weary. "If you go to a hospital, social services will take him," he said, his voice flat and devoid of sympathy. "You are homeless. You have no income. You have no legal guardian status anymore. Thanks to that paternity test, you walk into an emergency room, and you walk out alone. Is that what you want?" His words were a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. He was right. I was a non-entity. Victoria had stripped me of everything. "So what do?" I whispered, sinking to the floor beside Leo's cot. "Watch him die." "No." The man stood up and walked over to Leo. He placed a hand on my son's forehead, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You let him sleep. And you trust that I know more about heart rhythms than the overpaid butchers Richard hires." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled at my eyelids like lead weights. The hum of the servers was hypnotic. I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall, watching the chest of my sleeping son rise and fall, and let the darkness take me. Use of a heavy metal object banging against steel woke me up. Clang, clang, clang. My eyes snapped open. The bunker was brighter now, amber light filtering through high ventilation shafts. Leo was sitting up on the cot, holding a tablet, his eyes wide. "Open up. We know you're in there." The voice came from the other side of the heavy steel door. It wasn't the police. It was smoother, more arrogant. I recognized that voice. It was Elias Thorne, the Sterling family's head of legal counsel, a man who smiled while he evicted widows. "How did they find us?" I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "The beggar Gabriel." I remembered the name from the shadows of my mind was standing by the door, holding a mug of steaming coffee. He looked unbothered. "Your son's smartwatch," Gabriel said calmly. "It has a GPS tracker. I disabled it at 4 this morning, but that gave them a last known location." "You knew," I screamed, "and you didn't tell me." "I wanted them to come," he replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Better to face the sharks when you are on dry land." He unlocked the deadbolt and threw the door open. Elias Thorne stood there in a pristine gray suit, flanked by 2 private security contractors. The contrast between his polished Italian shoes and the grimy floor of the bunker was almost comical. He held a handkerchief to his nose, grimacing at the smell of the underground. "Miss Vance." Thorne stepped in, his eyes scanning the room with disdain before landing on me. "And whoever this is, I see you have found accommodation suitable to your new station in life. What do you want, Elias?" I demanded, stepping between him and Leo. Thorne pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase and held it out. "Mr. Sterling is a generous man. He has decided not to press charges for fraud, provided you comply with his terms." I snatched the envelope and tore it open. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, and my heart stopped. "Repayment of rearing fees," I choked out. $5 million. For 5 years of food, shelter, medical care, and clothing provided to a child that is not his. Thorne said smoothly, "It is a standard restitution claim. You knowingly deceived the family. You have 24 hours to remit the payment, or we will file criminal charges for grand larceny and fraud. You will go to prison, Miss Vance. And the boy, well, the state has facilities for unwanted children. I don't have $5 million, I shouted, crumpling the paper in my fist. You took everything. You took my jewelry, my phone, my clothes. Then I suggest you get creative. Thorne sneered, looking me up and down. Though looking at you now, I doubt you could earn $5 on a street corner, let alone 5 million. The security guard snickered. The humiliation burned my skin like acid. I wanted to scratch his eyes out, but I knew that if I touched him, I would be in handcuffs within seconds. Get out, a deep voice rumbled from behind me. Thorne looked at Gabriel. And you, harboring a fugitive and a trespasser. I can have the city seal this rat hole with you inside. Gabriel stepped forward. He didn't look like a beggar anymore. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther. He invaded Thorne's personal space, towering over the lawyer. You tell Victoria, Gabriel said, his voice low and dangerous, that the interest rate on her karma just went up. Thorne blinked, clearly unsettled by the intensity in Gabriel's eyes. He stepped back, straightening his tie. You have 24 hours. Elena, tick-tock. He turned and marched out, his guards following close behind. The steel door slammed shut, leaving the echo of his threat hanging in the air. I dropped the papers on the floor and sank to my knees, burying my face in my hands. The hopelessness crashed over me like a tidal wave. 5 million, I sobbed. I can't do it. Maybe if I sell my kidney a cornea, there are places. Your kidney is worth $10,000 on the black market, Gabriel said, his voice cutting through my hysteria. Your cornea, maybe 5. You would need to sell yourself piece by piece 100 times over to pay them. Then what do? I screamed at him, tears streaming down my face. They are going to put me in jail and take Leo. I have nothing. I am nobody. Stop it, Gabriel snapped. He walked over to the wall of monitors and typed a command. The screen shifted, displaying a complex web of financial data, stock tickers, and live security footage. I looked closer. One of the screens showed the interior of the Sterling mansion. I saw Richard laughing with Chloe in the living room. Another screen showed a bank account ledger with the name Victoria Sterling. You hacked them, I breathed, wiping my tears. I didn't hack them, Gabriel said, a cold smile touching his lips. I built their security system 10 years ago before they decided to ruin my life. They never changed the backdoor codes. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a fire that terrified and thrilled me. You don't pay debts to thieves, Elena. You collect them. You think you are powerless because they took your money. Money is just numbers. Power is information. He pointed to Leo, who was still holding the tablet. My son looked up, his face serious. Mom, Leo said, turning the tablet screen toward me. I found a pattern in the Sterling Pharmaceutical firewall. It is leaky. Gabriel nodded at my son, a look of respect passing between them. The boy has good instincts. He found the vulnerability in 5 minutes. It took me a week. Gabriel walked over to a metal cabinet and pulled out a sleek, pristine laptop. He shoved it into my hands. You used to be the best data analyst on Wall Street before Richard made you a housewife. Gabriel said, So, stop crying. We have 24 hours to turn that $5 million of debt into a weapon. I looked at the laptop. Then I looked at the screen showing Richard's smug face. The fear in my chest began to harden into something else. Something cold and sharp. What do we do? I asked. We are going to short sell their stock, Gabriel said. But first, we need to give the market a reason to panic. He tapped a key on the main screen. A video file opened. It was labeled Chloe Fast Livestream Thatcha Draft MP4. Chloe is about to go live to brag about her victory. Gabriel said, "Let's make sure the world sees her true face." I opened the laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in 5 years. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. "Show me," I said. "Welcome to the St. Regis." "Sir, may I take your bags?" The concierge at the 5-star hotel reception faltered, his nose wrinkling slightly. We were a sight to behold. Gabriel was limping, his trench coat stained with fresh blood and old grease. I was barefoot, my expensive evening gown torn at the hem and splattered with mud. Leo looked like a refugee in an oversized coat, clutching a rugged laptop like a teddy bear. "No bags," Gabriel said. Tossing the black card onto the pristine marble counter, it made a heavy, metallic clink. "Presidential suite. 1 week. And I need a first aid kit. The real one. With sutures." The concierge looked at the card. It was a Centurion black card, the kind made of titanium. Invite only. He looked back at Gabriel, his eyes widening. The sneer vanished instantly, replaced by a terrified reverence. Of course, Mr. Stone. Right away. I didn't recognize you." I looked at Gabriel. "Mr. Stone." The concierge knew him. "Keep it discreet," Gabriel muttered, leaning heavily on the counter as a wave of pain washed over his face. "And get a doctor. A private one. No records." 30 minutes later, we were on the 20th floor. The suite was bigger than the entire house I grew up in. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, now covered in snow. But I couldn't enjoy the view. Gabriel was sitting on the edge of the bathtub in the master bathroom, stripped to the waist. His torso was a map of scars, burn marks, knife wounds, bullet holes. And now, a massive, purple bruise blooming across his ribcage. "Hold the towel," he ordered, gritting his teeth as he poured rubbing alcohol over a gash on his forehead. He didn't flinch, but his muscles coiled tight. I dabbed the blood away, my hands trembling slightly. "You need a hospital, Gabriel. That rib might puncture a lung." "I've had worse," he grunted. "And hospitals have cameras. Richard owns half the hospital boards in this city." He looked at me in the mirror. For the first time, I saw us together, a battered warrior and a fallen princess. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why are you doing this for us? It can't just be because you hate Richard." Gabriel stopped. He turned to look at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. 10 years ago, I had a daughter. She had the same heart condition as Leo. My breath hitched. Richard's company developed a prototype valve. It was the only thing that could save her. But Victoria, she jacked up the price the day before the surgery. I couldn't pay. They let her die to make a quarterly revenue point. He looked down at his hands. "When I saw you in the snow, I didn't just see a woman. I saw a second chance." He stood up, wincing, and grabbed a fresh shirt the hotel staff had sent up. "Get dressed. Elena, the store's open in an hour. You can't destroy an empire looking like a victim." I walked into Bergdorf Goodman at 10:00 a.m. I was still wearing the torn dress, but I had washed my face and pulled my hair back into a severe bun. The salesgirl at the Chanel counter looked up from her phone, scanned me from head to toe, and let out a scoff. "Deliveries are in the back, sweetie." I didn't stop. I walked straight to her, pulled the black card from my bra, and slammed it on the glass counter. "I am not a delivery girl," I said, my voice icy. "I am the woman who is going to pay your commission for the next year. I want a wardrobe. Now." The girl stared at the card, then at me. Her attitude flipped so fast I almost got whiplash. "Yes. Ma'am, what? What style are you looking for?" "I don't want to look like a wife," I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the fear in my eyes fading, replaced by cold determination. I want to look like a CEO. I want to look like I own the building. Understood. 2 hours later, I emerged. I was wearing a tailored black Saint Laurent power suit with a plunging neckline that screamed dangerous confidence. My heels were Christian Louboutin, the red soles clicking against the pavement like gunshots. I wore oversized sunglasses to hide the shadows under my eyes. I wasn't Elena the orphan anymore. I was Elena the Avenger. When I returned to the hotel, Gabriel was sitting in the living room, typing on 3 laptops at once. Leo was beside him, eating a club sandwich and monitoring a scrolling wall of code. Gabriel looked up. He stopped typing. His eyes lingered on me for a second longer than necessary. Better, he said simply. Does it fit? Like a glove, I said. What's the next move? School, Gabriel said, pointing to the screen. St. Jude's Academy, the most prestigious elementary school in New York. Baron goes there. They rejected Leo yesterday. I reminded him. They said he didn't fit the profile. That was when you were a beggar. Gabriel said, now. You are the mysterious investor who just shorted Sterling Pharma, and I just bought a seat on the school board. You what? Money talks, Elena. But tonight. You need to make it scream. Gabriel slid a dossier across the table. The headmaster, Dr. Eris. He's having dinner at Le Bernardin tonight. You're going to crash it. And say what? You're not going to ask him to admit Leo. Gabriel smiled, a cruel, sharp expression. You're going to threaten to expose his offshore gambling debts if he doesn't. I picked up the dossier, photos of the respectable headmaster at a casino in Macau. Blackmail, I asked. Leverage, Gabriel corrected. Welcome to the 1%. That evening, I walked into Le Bernardin. The maitre d' tried to stop me, but I slipped him $100 bill and walked past him before he could protest. Dr. Eris was eating alone, nursing a glass of wine. He looked up, annoyed, as I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. Excuse me, this is a private table, he huffed, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Dr. Eris, I said smoothly, removing my sunglasses. My name is Elena Vance. I believe you made a mistake with my son's application. Vance. He squinted. Ah. The unfortunate case? Miss Vance? As I told your husband? Ex-husband, I corrected. And this isn't about him. It's about you. I slid a single photo across the table, face down. He picked it up. His face went pale. He choked on his wine. Where did you get this? He whispered. Does it matter? I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. My son, Leo, is a genius. He deserves to be in your school, not because of who his father is, but because if he isn't, well, I'd hate for the parents' committee to find out their tuition fees are funding your baccarat habit in Macau. Dr. Eris stared at me, sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked around the restaurant, paranoid. What do you want? Leo starts Monday, I said. Full scholarship. And an apology. Publicly? That's impossible. The board will be receiving a copy of this photo in 10 minutes if I don't get a confirmation email. I checked my Cartier watch bought an hour ago. He swallowed hard. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking. Fine, I'll do it. Good choice. I stood up, smoothing my suit. Oh, and Dr. Eris put him in the same class as Baron Sterling. They have some catching up to do. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. My heart was pounding, but for the first time. It wasn't from fear. It was from power. I stepped into the cold night air where a black town car was waiting. Gabriel was in the back seat. Done? he asked as I slid in. Done, I said, a smile tugging at my lips. Good, Gabriel said, handing me a tablet. Because Richard just made his move. He froze your access to the short sale funds. He's claiming the money is proceeds of cybercrime. My smile vanished. So we're broke again. No. Gabriel's eyes gleamed in the dark. It means he took the bait. Now we have access to his lawyer's digital signatures. Phase 2 begins. The tires of the black town car crunched over the pristine white snow of the drop-off zone at St. Jude's Academy. It was a sound that usually signaled the arrival of old money, of senators and oil tycoons. Today, it signaled war. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking against the pavement with a rhythmic precision that cut through the morning chatter of the Upper East Side mothers. I adjusted my sunglasses, feeling the weight of the Saint Laurent blazer on my shoulders. It was more than fabric. It was armor. Isn't that Elena Vance? A whisper floated through the crisp air, loud enough to be intentional. I thought she was living in a shelter. Look at her shoes. Are those new season? I didn't turn my head. I walked straight toward the wrought iron gates, holding Leo's hand. My son looked small in his new uniform, the navy blue blazer slightly too big for his fragile frame. But his eyes were sharp, scanning the environment like a soldier entering enemy territory. Target at 12 o'clock, Leo murmured, his voice devoid of fear. Blocking our path was Cynthia Vanderbilt, the president of the PTA and Victoria Sterling's best friend. She was flanked by 2 other women, forming a human barricade of Botox and beige cashmere. Cynthia crossed her arms, a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her cold. Dead eyes. Elena, she drawled, her voice dripping with faux concern. We were all so devastated to hear about your situation. Are you sure it's wise to bring the boy here? The tuition is quite steep, and we wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself when the check bounces. The other mothers tittered. It was a coordinated attack. Public shaming. The American way of killing someone without touching them. I stopped. I slowly removed my sunglasses and looked Cynthia dead in the eye. Cynthia, I said, my voice low and smooth. I was just looking at the PTA financial records from the last gala, the one you organized. Cynthia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Excuse me. You raised $2 million for the library. I continued, stepping closer until I could smell her nervous sweat through her Chanel No. 5. But the contractor invoice was only for $1.5 million. And oddly enough, your husband's construction firm just bought a new yacht worth exactly $500,000. The silence that fell over the group was instant and heavy. The 2 women flanking her took a subtle step back. That's slander, Cynthia hissed, her face flushing a patchy red. It's arithmetic, I corrected her coldly. Now, move. Unless you want me to forward the spreadsheets to the IRS before first period begins. Cynthia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She stepped aside, her eyes wide with terror. I walked past her, tightening my grip on Leo's hand. Nice calculation, Mom, Leo whispered. Basic subtraction, baby. Now go inside and show them what real genetics look like. I watched him walk into the building, his head held high. I didn't leave. I stood by the gate, waiting. I needed to know he survived the morning. Inside the classroom, the air smelled of chalk dust and privilege. Leo found his desk at the back, placing his tablet down neatly. Look who it is! A loud, jeering voice echoed from the front row. The beggar boy! Baron Sterling sat on top of his desk, swinging his legs. He was wearing a custom-tailored uniform that strained against his waistline. Chloe had clearly dressed him to look like a little prince, but his eyes held the dull, cruel glint of a bully who had never been told no. The other children giggled nervously. Baron was the king of the playground because his father donated the most money. My dad says your dad eats garbage. Baron laughed, throwing a crumpled piece of paper at Leo. It bounced off Leo's shoulder. Leo didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. He was arranging his pencils in perfect parallel lines. Hey, I'm talking to you. Retard, Baron shouted, sliding off the desk and marching over. He loomed over Leo, his fists clenched. Get out of my school. This is for rich people, not for trash. Mr. Harrison, the math teacher, hurried into the room. He was a timid man who looked terrified of his own students. All right, settle down. Baron, please take your seat. He doesn't belong here. Baron pointed a chubby finger at Leo. My grandma says he has bad blood. Actually, Leo spoke up, his voice calm and clear. If we are discussing bloodlines, Baron, your aggressive behavior and lack of impulse control suggest a heightened activity in the amygdala, often associated with lower cognitive function. It is a common trait in inbred lab rats. The entire class gasped. Mr. Harrison dropped his chalk. Baron turned purple. Shut up. You're stupid. You can't even read. I can read, Leo said. Standing up. He was a head shorter than Baron, but he seemed 10 feet tall. But can you count? Leo walked to the chalkboard. Mr. Harrison had written a basic multiplication problem, 12 x 12 equals 1. Leo picked up the chalk. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he drew a complex equation next to it. It was a quadratic function used to calculate projectile motion. If I throw this chalk at a velocity of 5 meters per second at an angle of 45 degrees, Leo narrated as he wrote the numbers with blinding speed. It will hit Baron directly in the forehead in exactly 0.8 seconds. He turned and looked at Baron. Do you want to check my math? Baron stood there, mouth open, confused. He looked at the board, then at Leo. The numbers meant nothing to him. You're a freak, Baron stammered, backing away. And you, Leo said, tossing the chalk into the air and catching it, are statistically insignificant. The class erupted into laughter, not at Leo, at Baron. The hierarchy of the playground had just shifted. Money could buy a seat, but it couldn't buy a brain. Back at the hotel, the atmosphere was less victorious. Gabriel was pacing the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. His limp more pronounced today. I don't care what the bank says. Override it, he growled. He hung up and threw the phone onto the couch. He looked at me as I walked in, pouring myself a glass of water. Richard is smarter than I thought, Gabriel admitted, rubbing his temples. When he froze your assets, he didn't just lock the account, he put a tracer on it. Any attempt to withdraw funds pings his legal team's server with our location. So we can't touch the money, I asked, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. The hotel bill is due in 3 days, Gabriel, and the tuition. We can't touch your money, Gabriel corrected. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. But thanks to his little trap, his lawyers had to log in to the central banking server to set the tracer, and they used their master administrative keys to do it. I stopped drinking. What does that mean? It means they left the front door open, walked inside, and forgot to lock it behind them. Gabriel sat down at his command center. They froze your 5 million. Fine. But those administrative keys give access to every account managed by that law firm. He began to type. His fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the sound like rapid-fire gunshots. What are you going to do? I moved behind him, watching the lines of code cascade down the screen in a green waterfall. Richard Sterling has a private holding company called RS Ventures, Gabriel explained, his eyes darting across the data. He uses it to hide his personal stock options from the tax man. It's an offshore shell company. Very illegal. Very lucrative. And I just used his lawyer's digital signature to authorize a margin call. Gabriel pressed the enter key with a decisive click. On the screen, a red bar appeared. Transaction pending. Authorized. A margin call, I asked. I just told the bank that RS Ventures is insolvent. Gabriel leaned back, crossing his arms. The bank's automated system is now legally required to liquidate his assets to cover the imaginary debt. It's selling his Sterling Pharma stock. All of it. At market price. Right now. That will crash the stock price, I whispered, realizing the magnitude of what he had done. Exactly, Gabriel said. And since you placed a short sale order yesterday, every dollar the stock drops is $1 in your pocket. In the penthouse office of Sterling Pharmaceuticals. Richard Sterling was enjoying a cigar. He had his feet up on his mahogany desk. Looking out at the skyline, he had crushed his wife. He had reclaimed his pride. Life was good. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. Then his desk phone rang. Then his secretary burst into the room without knocking. Mr. Sterling, you need to see the terminal, she screamed, her face pale. Richard frowned, taking his feet off the desk. What is it? Stupid woman, can't you see I'm busy? The stock. Sir, it's free-falling. Someone is dumping millions of shares. What? Richard scrambled to his computer. He pulled up the ticker. STL, 15%, 20%, 25%. The red line was plunging straight down like a stone dropped in a well. Who is selling? Richard roared, slamming his fist on the desk. Find out who is selling. It's you, sir. The secretary stammered, looking at her tablet. The order came from RS Ventures. Authorized by your legal team? Me. Richard's face went white. I didn't authorize anything. Cawthorne stop the trade. We can't. Sir, the market has triggered a circuit breaker. Trading is halted. But you've already lost $300 million in paper value. Richard stared at the screen. His cigar fell from his mouth, burning a hole in the Persian rug. His phone buzzed again. A text message from an unknown number. He picked it up with trembling hands. Message: genetics aren't the only thing you can't control. The beggar. Richard let out a primal scream of rage and hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. I sat in the hotel suite, watching the news. The headline on CNBC flashed in urgent red letters: Sterling Pharma Mystery Crash, CEO Dumps Stock. I looked at the balance on the trading account Gabriel had set up for me. The frozen $5 million was still frozen, but the profit from the short position. Profit $12,450,000. $12 million, I breathed. In 10 minutes. It's a good start, Gabriel said, not looking up from his screen. But money isn't enough. We hurt his wallet. Now we need to hurt his reputation. How? Tonight is the annual Medical Innovation Awards. Gabriel said, Richard is supposed to receive the Man of the Year award. He won't go, I said. Not after this crash. He has to go. Gabriel turned to me. If he doesn't show up, investors will think he's fleeing the country or arrested. He has to walk that red carpet and smile. He has to pretend everything is fine. And we are going to be there. I finished his thought, a wicked smile forming on my lips. No, Gabriel shook his head. We aren't just going to be there. We are going to present the award. He handed me an invitation. It was forged. Of course. Get ready, Elena, Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave, sending a shiver down my spine. You wanted to know why I live underground tonight. I'm going to tell the world, and I'm going to use Richard's microphone to do it. I looked at the invitation, then I looked at Leo, who was happily doing his calculus homework on the floor. Let's go steal a show, I said. Smile, you idiot. The cameras can smell fear like sharks smell blood. Victoria Sterling hissed the command through her clenched, porcelain-veneered teeth. pinching Richard's arm hard enough to leave a bruise under his bespoke tuxedo. Richard flinched, forcing the corners of his mouth upward into a rictus of joy that didn't reach his panicked eyes. The red carpet of the Pierre Hotel was blinding, a gauntlet of flashing strobes and shouting paparazzi. Usually, this was his kingdom. Tonight, it felt like a firing squad. Mr. Sterling, is it true Sterling Pharma lost $300 million in market cap this morning? A reporter from the Wall Street Journal shouted, thrusting a microphone over the velvet rope. Mr. Sterling, are the rumors of an SEC investigation true? Richard. Chloe chirped from beside him. Oblivious to the tension, she posed dramatically, turning her good side to the cameras, her hand resting possessively on his chest. Tell them about my dress. It's custom Vera Wang. Shut up, Chloe, Richard whispered venomously, dragging her forward. Nobody cares about your dress when my company is bleeding out. They reached the safety of the ballroom. It was a sea of black ties and diamonds, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. This was the Medical Innovation Awards. Richard was here to accept the Humanitarian of the Year trophy, a joke, considering he had spent the morning liquidating the pension fund to cover his margin call. Just get the award, give the speech about saving sick orphans, and let's leave, Richard muttered, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray and downing it in one gulp. I need to find out who attacked us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Please take your seats. The ceremony is about to begin. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage. And now, to present the award for Humanitarian of the Year. The announcer continued. We have a surprise guest, a last-minute benefactor who just donated $50 million to the Pediatric Heart Foundation. Richard frowned. $50 million. Who has that kind of cash lying around? Please welcome the new chairman of Stone Industries. The heavy curtains parted. Two figures walked out. The room went silent. Then, a murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. It was Elena. She was wearing a gown of liquid gold that clung to her curves like molten metal, with a slit that went up to her thigh. Her hair was slicked back, her makeup sharp and predatory. She didn't look like the weeping woman thrown out into the snow yesterday. She looked like a goddess of vengeance. And beside her was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him with military precision. His hair was cut short, his jawline clean-shaven and sharp as a knife. He radiated power, the kind of raw, masculine energy that made the air in the room feel thinner. Richard squinted. The man looked familiar. The eyes? Those cold, intelligent eyes. But he couldn't place him. Is that Elena? Chloe gasped, dropping her fork. She looks expensive. Who is the guy? Richard hissed. And why are they on my stage? Elena stepped to the microphone. She looked directly at Richard's table. Her smile was terrifying. Good evening. Her voice was smooth, amplified through the hall. It is an honor to be here to celebrate innovation and sacrifice. She paused. My partner and I are here to present an award to a man who has sacrificed everything for money, including his own humanity. The crowd chuckled, thinking it was a roast. Richard didn't laugh. Sweat trickled down his back. But first, the man beside her spoke. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. A story. He didn't use a teleprompter. He looked out at the audience, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the medical elite. 10 years ago, a young father came to Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The man said. His daughter had a rare heart condition. Sterling had the patent for the cure, a prototype valve. Richard froze. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the table. The father begged. The man continued, his voice devoid of emotion, yet heavy with menace. He offered everything he had, but the CEO Richard Sterling said it wasn't profitable to manufacture a single unit. He said the girl was statistically irrelevant. The room was dead silent now. You could hear a pin drop. So the girl died, the man said. She died in her father's arms, gasping for air, while Richard Sterling bought his third yacht. Security. Victoria stood up, her face white as a sheet. Cut the mic. Get them off stage. But the security guards didn't move. They were listening. That father lost his mind with grief. The man went on. Stepping closer to the edge of the stage, he walked away from his company. He walked away from his billions. He became a ghost. He lived on the streets, watching, waiting, rotting in the gutter right outside the Sterling mansion. He pointed a finger at Richard. You walked past me yesterday. Richard, you kicked snow in my face. You called me a piece of trash. Richard stood up, his legs shaking. You're the beggar. I was the beggar. The man corrected. Today, I am Gabriel Stone, founder of Stone Industries, the man who invented the algorithm that runs your stock market, your bank, and your security system. A collective gasp went through the room. Gabriel Stone. The name was a legend. The tech genius who vanished a decade ago. The Steve Jobs of artificial intelligence. And as of this morning, Gabriel's voice boomed like thunder. I am also the majority shareholder of Sterling Pharmaceuticals. Liar! Richard screamed, his voice cracking. That's impossible. I own 51%. You owned 51%. Gabriel smiled. A cold, shark-like expression. Until you defaulted on your margin call 4 hours ago, the bank seized your shares, and I bought them. All of them. Gabriel reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a crumpled, dirty medical bill. You killed my daughter for a few $1,000s. Gabriel said. So I spent $300 million to kill your legacy. Consider it a late payment. No. Richard grabbed the tablecloth, pulling dishes and glasses onto the floor in a crash of china. No security, arrest him. He's lying. Mr. Sterling, Elena spoke up, her voice cutting through Richard's panic. Technically, you are trespassing at a private corporate event. Security. The two burly guards who had thrown Elena out yesterday stepped out from the shadows of the stage, but this time, they weren't looking at her. They were looking at Richard. Please escort the former CEO out, Elena commanded. And don't be gentle. He has a thick skull. The guards moved toward Richard. Don't touch me, Richard shrieked, backing away, tripping over his own chair. Do you know who I am? I am a Sterling mother. Do something. Victoria sat frozen, her eyes locked on Gabriel. She knew. She realized now that the enemy she had made was not a beggar, but a titan she had awoken from slumber. Get him out, Gabriel said softly. The guards grabbed Richard by the arms. He thrashed and kicked, screaming obscenities, his tuxedo bunching up, his dignity stripped away in front of every camera in New York. Flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm, capturing the moment the king of pharma was dragged out like a common drunk. Chloe tried to follow him, sobbing. Wait. My purse, Richard? Wait for me. Elena watched them go. Then she turned to the microphone. I apologize for the interruption, she said to the stunned audience, but we have one more announcement regarding the patent for the heart valve that Mr. Sterling refused to produce. She looked at Gabriel. He nodded. As the new owners, Elena announced, we are releasing the patent into the public domain, effective immediately. No child will ever die because they can't afford a Sterling trademark again. The room was silent for 1 second. Then, someone started clapping. Then another. Within moments, the entire ballroom was on its feet. a thunderous ovation washing over them. But Gabriel wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at the side entrance, where Victoria Sterling was quietly trying to slip away. Not yet. Victoria. Gabriel whispered into the mic, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that only the front row and Victoria could hear. I haven't told them about the nursing home fire yet. Victoria stopped dead in her tracks. She turned slowly, her face a mask of pure terror. Ding. The golden elevator doors of the Sterling Tower slid open with a whisper, revealing the penthouse floor that had been forbidden to me for 5 years. The air up here was different. It smelled of polished mahogany, old money, and fear. I stepped out, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. Behind me, Gabriel walked with his hands in his pockets, his limp almost imperceptible today. He looked bored, like a man touring a property he had already decided to bulldoze. Ms. Vance. I mean, Ms. Sterling. Richard's executive assistant. A woman named Sharon who used to lose my messages whenever I called my husband, was standing behind her desk. She was shaking so hard she dropped her stapler. Clatter. It's Miss Vance, I said, not slowing down. And you have 5 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Sharon, security will escort you out. But I have a pension, she stammered. Your pension was invested in sterling stock, Gabriel said as he walked past her. Check the ticker. It's worth about as much as a sandwich right now. We reached the double oak doors of the CEO's office. The nameplate on the door read, Richard Sterling, Chairman. I didn't open the door. I looked at the security guard standing next to me. Kick it open, I ordered. The guard hesitated, then saw the look in Gabriel's eyes. He lifted his heavy boot and slammed it into the wood. Crack. The lock shattered. The doors flew open, banging against the walls. I walked into the sanctum. The room was massive. A panoramic view of Manhattan, a humidor on the desk, a portrait of Richard, 5 feet tall, hanging above the leather chair. Tacky, Gabriel muttered. He picked up a heavy crystal decanter of whiskey from the sidebar. He didn't pour a drink. He threw it at the portrait. Smash. The crystal exploded. Whiskey soaked into the canvas, ruining Richard's painted smile. The glass shards rained down on the leather chair like diamonds. It's better, I agreed. I walked around the massive desk. I ran my fingers over the leather. This was where Richard had sat when he signed the papers to cut off Leo's insurance. This was where he had laughed with his lawyers about how easy it was to manipulate me. I sat down in the chair. It was too big, but it felt right. How does it feel? Gabriel asked, leaning against the doorframe, watching me. It feels... I spun the chair around to face the city. Like justice. Across town, in a Motel 6 by the airport, the air smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. Richard Sterling sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. His tuxedo was crumpled, his shirt unbuttoned, stained with sweat and cheap vodka. This place is disgusting, Chloe whined from the bathroom. She came out wrapping a thin, scratchy towel around herself. There's a cockroach in the sink and no room service. You promised me a penthouse. Shut up, Richard rasped. He grabbed the bottle of Smirnoff from the nightstand. I'm thinking about what? How you let a beggar and your ex-wife steal everything. Chloe scoffed. She started digging through her purse. I'm calling an Uber. I'm going to my mom's. You're not going anywhere. Richard stood up, swaying slightly. He grabbed her wrist. You're the reason I'm in this mess. Bring Baron to the party. You said, humiliate her. You said, let go of me. You're hurting me. Chloe shrieked. I should have never listened to you. Richard shoved her back onto the bed. I should have kept Elena. She was useful, she was smart. You're just noise. I have your son, Chloe screamed, shielding Baron, who was watching cartoons on a cracked TV, oblivious to his parents' war. My son. Richard laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. He's a moron. Chloe, a genetic dead end. And thanks to him, I lost my company. He threw the bottle against the wall. It didn't break. It just thudded and rolled under the bed. I need money, Richard muttered, pacing the small room like a caged animal. I need cash to hire a lawyer, a real shark, not that idiot Thorne. His eyes fell on Chloe's finger, the diamond engagement ring, 5 carats. Give me the ring, Richard said. Chloe hid her hand behind her back. No, it's mine. You gave it to me. Richard lunged. He tackled her onto the bed, wrestling for her hand. Chloe screamed. Baron turned up the volume on the TV. Slap. Richard backhanded her across the face. Chloe went limp, sobbing. He yanked the ring off her finger, leaving a red welt. This is just a down payment. Richard spat, pocketing the ring. He grabbed his coat. I'm going to see my mother. She'll fix this. She always fixes this. He slammed the door, leaving his mistress and his heir in the dark. Victoria Sterling was not in a position to fix anything. She was in the library of her Upper East Side townhouse, pacing back and forth, clutching a rosary so tight her knuckles were white. The curtains were drawn. The house was dark. Every shadow looked like a monster. The nursing home, she whispered to herself. How does he know about the nursing home? She remembered the fire, 10 years ago, the Sunset Hills Care Facility. It was an old building, failing safety codes, filled with patients who had no family, patients like Gabriel Stone's grandmother. Victoria had needed the land for a new luxury condo project, but the tenants wouldn't leave, and eviction took too long. So, a candle was left burning. A faulty wire sparked. 20 people died. The insurance payout was massive. The land was cleared. It was the perfect crime, or so she thought. Her phone rang. She jumped, nearly dropping the rosary. It was a burner phone she kept in a hollowed-out book. Hello, she answered, her voice trembling. Mrs. Sterling. A voice rasped on the other end, rough, mechanical. We saw the news. You have a problem. I need it handled, Victoria said, her voice turning cold and desperate. The man, Gabriel Stone, and the woman, they know too much. Stone is high profile now, the voice said. It will cost triple. I don't care about the cost, Victoria hissed. I have millions in the Cayman Islands. I want them gone. I want it to look like an accident, a car crash, a robbery. I don't care. Just silence them. Consider it done, tonight. The line went dead. Victoria lowered the phone. She walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. A black sedan was parked across the street, watching. She wasn't safe, but if she struck first, she might survive. Back in the CEO's office, night had fallen. The city lights of New York glittered below us like a sea of diamonds. I was exhausted. My adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I kicked off my heels and curled my legs up onto the leather chair. Gabriel was sitting on the edge of the desk, loosening his tie. He held 2 tumblers of scotch, not the cheap stuff Richard drank. This was a bottle he had brought himself. To victory, he offered, handing me a glass. To survival, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. The sound was a soft, clear chime. I took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down my throat. What you did today? I looked at him. Releasing the patent. You gave away billions of dollars. I didn't need the money. Gabriel shrugged, staring into his amber drink. I needed peace. My daughter. I couldn't save her. but maybe that patent will save 10,000 other daughters. That's a better ROI than any stock dividend. I reached out and placed my hand over his. His skin was rough, calloused, warm. He froze at my touch, then slowly turned his hand over to interlace his fingers with mine. "You're a good man, Gabriel," I whispered. "Underneath all that scary armor?" He looked at me. The intensity in his eyes made my breath hitch. He leaned closer. I could smell the sandalwood and danger on him. "I'm not a good man, Elena," he murmured, his thumb tracing the pulse on my wrist. "I've done terrible things to get here. I hacked governments. I destroyed lives. I lived in the dark for so long, I forgot what the light looked like." "Until when?" I asked, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Until I saw a mother fighting a blizzard for her son," he said softly. He leaned in. His lips were inches from mine. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back. Beep! 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 A sharp, rhythmic sound cut through the silence. Gabriel pulled back instantly. His eyes snapped to his watch. The face of the watch was flashing red. "What is it?" I asked, disoriented. "Proximity alarm," Gabriel said, his voice shifting from lover back to soldier in a split second. He jumped off the desk and ran to the window. "I set sensors in the lobby. Someone just bypassed the night security." "Who?" "Not police. They moved too fast." Gabriel grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the chair. "And not lawyers. Lawyers don't carry signal jammers." He pointed to his phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi was dead. "We have company," Gabriel said, dragging me toward the private elevator. "Assassins." Victoria didn't waste any time. "Assassins," I gasped, grabbing my shoes. "Here in the tower. The best place to hide a murder is in a skyscraper." Gabriel pressed the button for the underground parking. "If they cut the power, we are trapped in a 60-story coffin." As if on cue, the lights in the office flickered and died. Total darkness. Then, the sound of breaking glass from the outer reception area. Crash. "Run," Gabriel whispered. The darkness in the Sterling Tower wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and alive with the sound of hunting. "Stay low." Gabriel breathed against my ear, his hand a vice grip on my arm. "They have night vision. We are blind. They are not." We were crouching behind the reception desk of the executive floor. The only light came from the red emergency exit signs, casting long, bloody shadows across the hallway. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, threatening to crack the bone. Thwip! A soft coughing sound. The mahogany vase on the pedestal 3 feet away from my head exploded into ceramic dust. "Silencers," Gabriel whispered, pulling me down as another bullet shredded the leather of the reception chair. 3 shooters, moving in a triangle formation, professionals. "How do we get out?" I hissed, my hands trembling as I gripped his tuxedo jacket. "The elevators are dead." "Stairwell," Gabriel said, "but they are blocking the path. I have to clear a hole." He looked at me, in the crimson light. His face was a mask of cold resolve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver fountain pen. "A pen." I stared at him. "You're going to fight gunmen with a pen." "It's solid titanium," Gabriel said. "Stay here, count to 10, then run for the north stairwell. Don't look back." "Gabriel, no." He didn't listen. He moved. He didn't run away from the gunfire. He ran toward it. He slid across the polished marble floor like a shadow, disappearing into the darkness of the open-plan office. "1." I heard a grunt, the sound of flesh hitting a cubicle wall. "2. Contact left," a distorted voice shouted through a tactical mask. "Thwip! Thwip! Thwip!" Bullets tore through the air, shattering computer monitors and shredding paperwork. The office sounded like a war zone. 5. A scream, not Gabriel's. A gurgling, wet sound that ended abruptly. 7. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't just wait for him to die. I crawled toward the break room. My knee landed on a shard of glass, slicing my skin. But I swallowed the cry of pain. I needed a weapon. Anything. I reached up to the counter. My hand closed around a heavy, industrial-sized fire extinguisher. 9. I see him! A voice yelled. By the copier! I peered over the counter. A man dressed in tactical black gear, wearing glowing green goggles, had Gabriel pinned against the wall. He had a gun pressed to Gabriel's chest. Gabriel was holding the man's wrist, struggling, blood dripping from a fresh graze on his temple. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger. 10. I didn't run to the stairwell. I yanked the safety pin out of the extinguisher. Hey, I screamed. The assassin turned his head. His night vision goggles were trained right on me. I squeezed the handle. A massive cloud of white chemical foam erupted from the nozzle, hitting him squarely in the face. The foam coated his goggles, blinding him instantly. The sudden whiteout in a dark room must have been like a flashbang to his amplified vision. Ah, my eyes, he screamed, stumbling back, firing wildly into the ceiling. Gabriel didn't waste the second. He spun around, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted. A sickening snap echoed through the room. The assassin dropped the gun. Gabriel drove his knee into the man's helmet, knocking him out cold. Gabriel picked up the fallen gun. He looked at me, panting, wiping blood from his eye. He looked impressed. Fire extinguisher, he rasped. Classic. I improvised, I said, my voice shaking. Are you okay? We need to go. The third one is. Bang! The shot didn't come from a silencer. It was loud. A sniper round. It punched through the window glass from the building opposite us. Gabriel jerked violently as the bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to the floor, the gun sliding away. Sniper! Gabriel yelled, dragging himself behind a filing cabinet. They have a shooter on the roof across the street. Keep your head down. We were pinned, 2 assassins down inside, 1 sniper outside, and 1 more shooter somewhere in the dark. While I was fighting for my life in a skyscraper, my ex-husband was fighting a different kind of battle in an Upper East Side townhouse. Richard stood in the hallway of his mother's house. He had used his key to get in, hoping to beg Victoria for money, for a lawyer, for anything to save him. But the house was silent, too silent. He heard a voice coming from the library, Victoria's voice, but she wasn't crying. She sounded calm, cold. Is it done? She asked. Richard crept closer to the door, peering through the crack. Victoria was sipping tea, holding a phone to her ear. What do you mean, resistance? I paid for professionals. She snapped. I don't care if you have to burn the whole Sterling Tower down. Just make sure Elena and that Stone bastard are dead before sunrise. Richard froze. His hand gripping the doorknob went slick with sweat. Dead. He hated Elena. He wanted her broke. He wanted her humiliated. But dead. And what about Richard? The voice on the other end must have asked. Richard held his breath. Victoria sighed, examining her manicure. My son is a liability. He's weak. He knows too much about the accounting fraud. Even if he's too stupid to realize it, if he comes asking questions, handle him too. Make it look like a suicide. A disgraced CEO taking his own life. It's poetic. Really. Richard felt the world tilt on its axis. His mother, the woman he had spent his entire life trying to please, the woman he had destroyed his marriage for. She had just ordered his execution. He backed away from the door, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would burst. He stepped on a loose floorboard. Creak. Victoria's head snapped up. "Who's there?" Richard turned and ran. He ran out of the house, into the cold night, not looking back. He scrambled into his car, his hands shaking so badly he could barely put the key in the ignition. He peeled out of the driveway just as the front door opened and Victoria's bodyguard stepped out, reaching into his jacket. Richard drove blindly. Tears streamed down his face. He was alone, truly alone. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He glanced at it. It was a notification from the school app, St. Jude's Academy Emergency Contact Update. He looked at the screen, a picture of Leo. For 5 years. He had looked at that boy with contempt. Now, driving through the blurred lights of New York, he realized something. Leo was the only person in this family who wasn't a monster. And Elena was in the tower. Richard slammed on the brakes, screeching to a halt in the middle of Park Avenue. Cars honked behind him. He looked at the Sterling Tower in the distance. The top floor was dark. "Damn it," Richard sobbed, hitting the steering wheel. "Damn it all." He slammed his foot on the accelerator. He wasn't driving away. He was driving toward the tower. Gabriel. I pressed my hands against his shoulder. The blood was warm and sticky, seeping through his shirt. "You're hit." "It's just a scratch." Gabriel gritted his teeth, his face pale in the flashing red light. "Through and through, didn't hit the bone." "We're trapped," I whispered. "If we move, the sniper gets us. If we stay, the last shooter finds us." "We don't stay," Gabriel said. He reached into his belt and pulled out a small, blinking device. "Remember the server room? The cooling system?" "Yes. The servers are liquid-cooled. Nitrogen." Gabriel handed me the device. "This is a remote detonator for the emergency vent system. If I blow the tanks, this entire floor fills with nitrogen gas. It creates a white fog. Zero visibility, even for thermal goggles. But we'll freeze. We have 30 seconds before the temperature drops to hypothermic levels." Gabriel looked at me. "Can you run to the fire escape in 30 seconds? "I can run," I said, kicking off my heels. "But can you—" Gabriel looked at his bleeding shoulder, then at me. He smirked. "Try to keep up. Princess." He pressed the button. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the floor. A hissing sound erupted like a jet engine. White, freezing fog poured from the vents, instantly filling the room. "Go!" Gabriel yelled. We sprinted. The cold hit me instantly. It bit into my skin, turning my sweat to ice. The white fog was so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Thwip! Thwip! Bullets flew blindly through the mist, pinging off metal cabinets. "Clear!" Gabriel shouted, kicking the stairwell door open. We tumbled into the concrete stairwell, slamming the heavy fire door behind us. The hissing sound was muffled, but the cold lingered. "Down," Gabriel ordered. 60 floors, move." We started to descend. My lungs burned. My feet were bleeding, but we were alive. We ran down 10 flights, 20. Suddenly, the door on the 40th floor opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a suit. He held a pistol with shaking hands. It was Richard. I froze on the landing, gripping the railing. Gabriel raised his gun instantly, aiming right at Richard's head. "Richard," I gasped. Richard looked at me, then at Gabriel. He looked like a wreck. Sweat, tears, and desperation. "Don't shoot," Richard said, his voice cracking. He lowered his gun. I didn't come to kill you. Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in your brain right now." Gabriel growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Because." Richard swallowed hard, looking at me with eyes full of a strange, terrified clarity. "Because my mother just put a hit out on me too, and I know where the bodies are buried. Gabriel didn't lower the gun. What bodies? The nursing home, Richard whispered. I know where she keeps the original architectural plans, the ones that prove she ordered the fire exits sealed to save money on construction. Silence hung heavy in the stairwell. Help me, Richard pleaded, dropping his gun and kicking it toward us. Help me take the bitch down. Kick the gun over. Now. Gabriel didn't lower his weapon. His face was gray, slick with sweat. But his aim didn't waver. A single drop of blood fell from his shoulder sleeve, hitting the concrete floor with a heavy splat that echoed in the silent stairwell. Richard kicked the pistol across the floor. It skidded to my bare feet. I picked it up. The metal was cold, heavier than I expected. I pointed it at my ex-husband. Where is the evidence? Richard, I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline shaking my hands. And don't lie, Gabriel might be bleeding out, but I have a full magazine. It's in the Bronx, Richard said. Holding his hands up, he looked pathetic in his ruined suit, stripped of his arrogance. The old distribution warehouse on Bruckner Boulevard. Mother keeps a private archive in the basement. The dead file, she calls it. Why would she keep evidence of a crime? Gabriel wheezed, leaning heavily against the railing. Why not burn it? Because she's a hoarder of leverage. Richard let out a bitter laugh. She keeps dirt on everyone. Senators, judges, me, even herself. She thinks it's insurance. If she goes down, she takes the whole city with her. We need a car, I said, looking at Gabriel's shoulder. The blood was soaking through his jacket fast. We can't take the subway. My Porsche is in the sub-basement garage. Richard offered. Private elevator access. The assassins won't be looking there. You drive, Gabriel ordered me, tossing me the keys he had taken from Richard's pocket. He grabbed Richard by the collar with his good arm, shoving him toward the door. And you sit in the front where I can see you. If you reach for the door handle, I shoot you in the knee. The drive to the Bronx was a blur of streetlights and tension. The Porsche 911 tore through the Harlem River Drive, the engine roaring like a beast. In the passenger seat, Richard was scrolling through his phone. She blocked my cards, he muttered, staring at the screen. She wiped my access to the penthouse. She even canceled my gym membership. She really erased me in an hour. She tried to kill us. Richard, I said, gripping the steering wheel tight. A gym membership is the least of your problems. You don't understand. Richard looked at me, his eyes hollow. I did everything she asked. For 40 years. I married who she wanted. I ran the company how she wanted. I even treated Leo like trash because she told me he was weak. That wasn't her. Gabriel's voice came from the cramped back seat, strained and weak. That was you. Richard, you're a grown man. Don't blame Mommy for your cruelty. Richard flinched. He looked in the rearview mirror. He saw Gabriel pressing a wad of napkins against his shoulder. Eyes closed, face pale as death. Suddenly, Richard's phone buzzed, a video call. It's Leo. Richard stared at the screen. He's calling my number. Answer it, I commanded. Put it on speaker. Richard tapped the screen. Leo's face appeared, pixelated but clear. He was in the hotel room, wearing oversized headphones. Mom. Leo's voice filled the car. I lost Gabriel's signal. His vitals monitor went offline. Is he alive? Richard froze. His son, the boy he called a retard, was asking about another man. He's here, Leo, I said. He's hurt, but he's alive. Tell him to apply pressure to the subclavian artery, Leo said urgently. And Mom, the police scanner says there are reports of shots fired at the tower. Are you safe? We're safe, baby. We're coming home soon. Is the bad man with you? Leo asked. Richard looked at the phone. He knew Leo meant him. Yes, I said, but he's helping us right now. Watch him, Mom, Leo said coldly. His probability of betrayal is 89%. The call ended. Richard stared at the black screen. The silence in the car was deafening. He hates me, Richard whispered. He doesn't hate you, Gabriel groaned, opening his eyes. You're just statistically insignificant to him. That hurts more, doesn't it? The warehouse on Bruckner Boulevard was a rotting carcass of red brick and broken windows. It looked abandoned, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Pull around back, Richard instructed. There's a loading dock with a keypad. I parked the car in the shadows. Gabriel stumbled as he got out, his legs giving way. I caught him. He was burning up. Fever. I'm fine, he lied, pushing himself off the car hood. You're going into shock, I said. Richard, get the door open, fast. Richard ran to the rusted steel door. He punched in a code. Error. She changed it. Richard panicked. Damn it. She changed the codes. Gabriel limped forward. He pulled a small device from his pocket, the same one he used on Leo's heart. He jammed 2 wires into the keypad circuit board. Buzz. Click. The light turned green. After you, Gabriel gestured with his gun. We descended into the basement. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old paper. Rows of metal filing cabinets stretched into the darkness. Vault is in the back. Richard led the way, using his phone as a flashlight. We reached a heavy steel door set into the concrete wall, a biometric scanner. This requires a retina scan, Richard said. Only Mother and I have access. He stepped up to the scanner. A red laser swept across his eye. Access granted. The heavy bolts retracted with a groan. The door swung open. Inside, it wasn't just files. It was a museum of corruption, hard drives, tapes, blueprints. Chi? Shelf D? Richard went straight to a dusty box. He pulled out a roll of large blue papers. He unrolled them on a table. Here. Richard pointed. His fingers shook. Sunset Hills Nursing Home. Fire Safety Plan. I looked closer. There were red stamps all over the exits. Sealed. Cost reduction measure. And at the bottom, a signature authorizing the change. Richard stared at the signature. He stopped breathing. What is it? I asked. That's not her signature, Richard whispered. That's mine. What? I didn't sign this. Richard looked at me, eyes wide with horror. I was in college when this was built. She forged my signature. Gabriel stepped closer, looking at the date. She set you up. From the very beginning, you were always the fall guy. Richard, if the fire was ever investigated, you would go to prison for manslaughter, and she would be the grieving mother. Richard slumped against the table. The weight of 40 years of manipulation crashed down on him. He wasn't the heir. He was the scapegoat. She never loved me, Richard said, his voice breaking. I was just inventory. Grab the papers, Gabriel said, his voice slurring slightly. He leaned heavily on the table, blood dripping onto the concrete floor. We have what we need. Let's go. Gabriel turned to leave, but his knees buckled. He collapsed, hitting the floor hard. Gabriel, I screamed, dropping the gun and rushing to him. He was unconscious. His face was gray. The shoulder wound had reopened, soaking his shirt. We have to get him to a hospital, I yelled at Richard. Help me carry him. Richard stood there, looking at the fallen man. Then he looked at the blueprints. Then at the gun lying on the floor. He picked up the gun. I froze. Richard, I said slowly, rising to stand between him and Gabriel. Don't do this. Richard looked at the gun in his hand. Then he looked at the blueprints that proved his mother planned to frame him for mass murder. You can't carry him alone. Elena, Richard said. He's too heavy. He tucked the gun into his waistband. He walked over, grabbed Gabriel's good arm, and hoisted him up. Let's get him to the car, Richard grunted. But I'm driving. You drive like a grandma. We dragged Gabriel up the stairs. The fresh air hit us. But so did something else. Sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against the warehouse walls. 4 NYPD cruisers were blocking the gate, and behind them, a black SUV with tinted windows. Victoria's car? She called the cops. Richard realized. She's going to claim we broke in. Burglary. Trespassing. Or she's going to let the cops kill us in a shootout, I said. Seeing the officers drawing their weapons behind their car doors. Drop the weapon! Come out with your hands up! A voice boomed over a megaphone. We were trapped. Gabriel was unconscious. We had the evidence, but no way to deliver it. Richard looked at the police line. Then he looked at me. Take the back exit, Richard said. There's a hole in the fence near the train tracks. It leads to the subway yard. What about you? I asked. Richard pulled the blueprints from his pocket. He shoved them into my hands. Then he pulled the gun out. I'm going to distract them, Richard said. Richard, no, they'll shoot you. I'm statistically insignificant. Remember. Richard gave a sad, crooked smile. Get Gabriel out of here. Save my son. He didn't wait for an answer. He kicked the front door open and stepped out into the blinding spotlight, waving the gun in the air. Hey, over here, Richard screamed, sprinting toward the police line, away from where I was hiding. Suspect is moving, he has a gun. The gunfire erupted instantly. I didn't look. I hoisted Gabriel's weight onto my shoulder and ran into the darkness of the back lot. The sound of bullets tearing into my ex-husband echoing in the night. The stench of rusted iron and stagnant water filled my nose as I dragged Gabriel's dead weight into the maintenance alcove deep within the subway tunnel. My bare feet slipped on the grimy concrete, and my lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. Every few minutes. The ground shook as a train roared past overhead, the vibration rattling the loose tiles on the walls and sending dust raining down on us. Gabriel, stay with me, I pleaded, slapping his cheek. His skin was burning hot, but he was shivering violently. I checked his shoulder. The makeshift bandage I had tied was soaked through. The blood was dark and flowing too fast. He wasn't just bleeding, he was draining. Hospitals are out, I whispered to myself, panic rising in my throat like bile. They'll be watching the ERs. If I take him in, Victoria wins. I fumbled for Richard's phone. It had 12% battery left. I dialed the only number that mattered. Mom? Leo's voice came through instantly. He sounded calm, almost robotic. But I could hear the rapid clicking of a keyboard in the background. I have triangulated your position based on the cell tower ping. You are in the abandoned maintenance shaft near the 138th Street station. Leo, he's dying. I choked out, tearing a strip from my ruined dress to bind the wound tighter. The bleeding won't stop. He's going into hypovolemic shock. Show me, Leo commanded. I switched to video call and aimed the camera at Gabriel's shoulder. There was a pause on the other end, a terrifying silence. The bullet nicked the axillary artery. Leo said. His voice didn't waver, but the speed of his speech increased. You cannot stitch that. You do not have the equipment. You have to cauterize it. Cauterize it. I stared at the phone. Burn it, Leo. I can't. I don't have anything. You have a lighter, Leo said. I saw Gabriel put a Zippo in his pocket when you left the hotel, and you need metal. A knife. A screwdriver. Anything flat. I frisked Gabriel's pockets. My hands were slick with his blood. I found the silver Zippo lighter. Then I looked around the maintenance room. It was a graveyard of old tools. I found a rusted putty knife on a workbench. I found a knife, I said, my voice trembling. It's dirty. Sterilize it with the flame, Leo instructed. Then heat it until it glows red. Mom, you have to do this. If you don't, his probability of survival drops to 0 in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Okay, I said, wiping tears from my face with a bloody hand. Okay. I lit the lighter. The flame danced in the dark, casting long, monstrous shadows against the walls. I held the blade over the fire. 1 minute passed. The metal began to change color. Gabriel groaned, his head rolling to the side. His eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. Elena, he rasped. Leave me, go! Shut up, I said, my voice hard. You don't get to die. You bought a company today. You have work tomorrow. Mom, do it now, Leo said through the phone. Press it directly onto the vessel. Count to 3. Do not hesitate. I looked at Gabriel. This is going to hurt. He looked at the glowing blade. He understood. He didn't argue. He bit down on the leather collar of his jacket and nodded. I took a deep breath. I pressed the red-hot metal into the open wound. The sound was the worst part, the wet hiss of burning flesh. Gabriel arched his back, a guttural scream tearing from his throat. Muffled only by the leather in his mouth, his body convulsed, his hand gripping my wrist so hard I thought he would break the bone. 1, I counted, tears streaming down my face. The smell of burnt skin filled the small airless room, making me gag. 2, Gabriel's eyes rolled back in his head. His body went rigid, then limp. 3, I pulled the knife away. The flow of blood had stopped. The wound was an ugly, charred mess, but it was sealed. It's done, I sobbed into the phone. Leo, it's done. He passed out. Check his pulse, Leo said. I pressed my fingers to Gabriel's neck. It was weak, thready but steady. He is stable, Leo said. I could hear him let out a breath for the first time. Good job, Mom. Now cover him. Keep him warm. I am hacking the traffic cameras to find a safe route for extraction. I collapsed next to Gabriel, pulling his heavy trench coat over both of us. I rested my head on his uninjured chest, listening to the faint beat of his heart in the darkness of the tunnel. Covered in blood and grime, I held the billionaire who had saved me, and I realized I would burn the whole world down if anyone tried to touch him again. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was sterile, cold, and white. The intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Richard Sterling lay in a bed, hooked up to tubes and wires. His chest was heavily bandaged where the police bullet had punctured his lung. His wrist was handcuffed to the bedrail. The door to his room slid open. A woman walked in. She was dressed in black silk, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. She carried a bouquet of white lilies. The police officer guarding the door stood up. Ma'am, no visitors. He's under arrest. I am his mother, Victoria Sterling said. Lowering her glasses to reveal red-rimmed eyes, she looked like the picture of grief. Please, I just want to see my son. He might not make it through the night. The officer hesitated. He saw a broken old woman. He didn't see the shark underneath. 5 minutes, the officer said, opening the door. But don't touch anything. Victoria walked in. As soon as the door closed, her posture straightened. The grief vanished instantly, replaced by a look of utter contempt. She walked to the bedside. She looked down at Richard. He was awake, his eyes groggy from the morphine. Mother, Richard whispered, his voice barely a rasp. You idiot, Victoria said softly, placing the flowers on the table. You spectacularly incompetent idiot. I saved them. Richard managed to smile, a weak, pathetic smile. I did one good thing. You ruined everything. Victoria corrected him, running a gloved hand over his forehead. It looked affectionate, but her fingers were cold. You gave them the blueprints. You testified against your own legacy. I testified against a murderer. Richard wheezed. The police. They have my statement. The police have the ramblings of a man high on painkillers who just tried to charge a SWAT team. Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. And by morning, you will have succumbed to your injuries, a tragic complication, an embolism. Perhaps. Richard's eyes widened. He tried to pull his hand away, but the handcuff rattled against the metal rail. You wouldn't, he gasped. I brought you into this world. Richard, Victoria said, her hand moving down to the clear plastic tube that delivered oxygen to his nose. I have every right to take you out of it. She pinched the tube. Richard's breath hitched. He gasped for air, his chest heaving against the bandages. The monitor's beep began to speed up. Beep! 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 Don't struggle, Victoria soothed, watching the numbers on the screen drop. It's just like going to sleep. You were always so good at sleeping while I did the real work. Richard clawed at the bedsheets. His vision began to blur. He looked at his mother's face, distorted and demonic in the fluorescent light. Suddenly, the door burst open. Code Blue Room 304. A team of nurses and a doctor rushed in. Victoria released the tube instantly, stepping back with a gasp of theatrical horror. Oh my God, what's happening? Victoria cried, clutching her chest. Help him! The doctor pushed past her. Get her out of here. Stabilize him. The police officer grabbed Victoria's arm. Ma'am, you have to leave. Victoria let herself be dragged out, sobbing fake tears. But as she looked back over her shoulder at Richard, her eyes were dry and hard as flint. Richard gasped in a lungful of air as the doctor adjusted the mask. He was alive, but he saw the look in his mother's eyes. She would be back. Back in the tunnel. Time had lost its meaning. It could have been hours or days. Gabriel stirred. He groaned, shifting under the coat. Don't move, I whispered, stroking his hair. It was matted with sweat. You'll rip the burn open. Gabriel opened his eyes. He looked at me in the dim light of the phone screen. He looked at the blood on my face, the soot on my dress, the raw burn marks on my hands from holding the hot metal. You stayed, he whispered. His voice was rough, like gravel. Where else would I go? I asked softly. You had the evidence, Gabriel said. You could have run, taken it to the press, saved yourself. The evidence is worthless without you, I said. And I'm tired of being saved. Gabriel, I wanted to do the saving for once. He reached up with his good hand. His fingers brushed my cheek, wiping away a smudge of dirt. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with survival. You are terrifying, Elena Vance, he murmured. A small smile touched his lips. Is that a compliment? It is the highest compliment I can give. He tried to sit up, wincing. We can't stay here. Victoria failed to kill Richard. I heard it on the police scanner before I passed out. Richard is alive. I felt a wave of relief. That means he can testify. It means Victoria is desperate, Gabriel corrected. She missed her shot. Now she is going to scorch the earth. She will come for Leo next. My blood ran cold. Leo is at the hotel. It's secure. Nothing is secure, Gabriel said, struggling to his feet. He swayed, and I caught him. We have to get the blueprints to the one person Victoria can't bribe, and we have to do it before sunrise. Who? The district attorney, Gabriel said. But he's at his vacation home in the Hamptons. We have a 3-hour drive, and every cop in the city is looking for a black Porsche. We don't have a Porsche anymore, I reminded him. We have feet. Gabriel looked at the tunnel stretching into the darkness. Then we walk, he said, until we find a car we can steal. The metal grate of the subway exit groaned as I pushed it open, the sound screeching through the silent alley like a dying animal. We emerged into the Bronx night, gasping for air that smelled of wet pavement, exhaust fumes, and freedom. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the city covered in a dirty, gray slush that seeped instantly into my bare, frozen feet. Gabriel slumped against the brick wall of a bodega, his face the color of ash. The trench coat hid the blood, but I could smell it that metallic copper tang that was becoming the perfume of our lives. "We need wheels," Gabriel rasped, his eyes scanning the street with a feverish intensity. "Something fast, something invisible." "There." I pointed to a idling delivery truck parked in front of the bodega. The driver was inside, arguing with the cashier about the price of cigarettes. The engine was rumbling, puffing white smoke into the cold air. A flower delivery van. Gabriel raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile touching his pale lips. "Not exactly a getaway car." "Elena. It has a full tank and the keys are in the ignition," I said. "Already moving." "Beggars can't be choosers. Billionaire." I didn't wait for him. I ran to the driver's side, yanked the door open, and climbed into the cracked leather seat. The cab smelled of stale coffee and lilies. Gabriel limped around to the passenger side, throwing himself in just as the bodega door chimed. "Hey, hey, what are you doing?" the driver shouted, running out, waving a carton of Marlboros. I slammed the truck into drive and floored the accelerator. The tires spun on the icy asphalt, screeching for traction. Before the heavy van lurched forward, we peeled away from the curb, leaving the shouting driver shrinking in the rearview mirror. "You drive like a maniac," Gabriel groaned, clutching his shoulder as we swerved onto the on-ramp for the Cross Bronx Expressway. "I learned from the best," I shot back, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Next stop, the Hamptons. The Long Island Expressway at 3:00 a.m. was a desolate ribbon of concrete stretching into the darkness. Streetlights flickered overhead, creating a hypnotic strobe effect inside the cab. Gabriel was fading, his head lulled against the window, his breathing shallow and ragged. The adrenaline from the surgery was wearing off, leaving behind the crushing weight of trauma and blood loss. "Stay awake," I commanded. Reaching across the center console to grip his hand, his skin was burning hot. "Talk to me, Gabriel. Tell me about her, your daughter." He didn't open his eyes, but his thumb brushed against my knuckles. "Her name was Sarah. She had your eyes. Stubborn like you. Too. She would be proud of you," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the road. A police cruiser sat in the median ahead. I held my breath, easing off the gas, letting the flower van blend into the slow lane. The cruiser didn't move. "She wouldn't," Gabriel whispered, his voice laced with a pain that had nothing to do with the bullet wound. "I spent so much time building the company, building the algorithm. I thought money would save her. I wasn't there when she took her last breath. Elena." I was in a boardroom, yelling at lawyers. A tear slipped down his cheek, catching the orange glow of the streetlights. "That's why I helped you," he continued, turning his head to look at me. "When I saw you in the snow, you didn't care about the money. You didn't care about your dignity. You just wanted to save Leo. You were the parent I failed to be. I didn't save him." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I let them humiliate him for 5 years. I let Richard treat him like a mistake. "You survived," Gabriel said fiercely. "You took the hit so he wouldn't have to. That isn't weakness. Elena, that is the strongest armor in the world." He squeezed my hand. "And tonight, in that tunnel, you saved me. No one has ever saved me before." I looked at him, in the dim light of the dashboard. The billionaire genius looked vulnerable, broken, and incredibly beautiful. "We save each other," I whispered. "That's the deal." The moment hung in the air, thick and electric. For a second. We weren't fugitives. We were just two broken people finding jagged pieces that fit together. Then, the phone on the dashboard buzzed. It was Leo. Mom." Leo's voice was tight. "I have bad news. I just intercepted a localized transmission from the Suffolk County Police Band." "What is it?" "Leo!" A silent alarm was triggered at District Attorney Harper's estate 10 minutes ago, but police dispatch was ordered to stand down by a federal override code. "Federal override." Gabriel straightened up, wincing. "That's not local cops. That's high-level clearance." "Or someone pretending to have high-level clearance," Leo corrected. "Victoria doesn't have federal power, but her private security firm, Blackwatch, employs former feds who still have their old codes. They beat us there," I realized, a cold dread settling in my stomach. "They know we're coming." "Turn around," Gabriel said, reaching for the wheel. "Elena, turn around. It's a trap." "And go where?" I argued, swatting his hand away. "If we don't deliver this evidence tonight, Richard dies in that hospital and Victoria buries this forever. This is our only shot." "It's a suicide mission." "We have the element of surprise," I said, my jaw setting. "They expect a scared housewife and a dying man. They don't know who they're dealing with." "Who are they dealing with?" Gabriel asked, staring at me. "A mother who is done running." I slammed my foot on the gas. The flower van roared, pushing 80 miles per hour toward the coast. The Hamptons were silent. Massive hedges hid mansions worth $50 million, the streets empty and pristine. We killed the headlights a mile away from D.A. Harper's estate, rolling the van silently down the tree-lined driveway. The gate was open. "Strike one," Gabriel muttered, checking the magazine of the pistol Richard had given us. 4 rounds left. Make them count." We parked in the shadows of a massive oak tree. The house was dark, save for a single light in the study on the first floor. We moved through the garden, the frozen grass crunching softly under my bare feet. My black suit was torn, stained with mud and blood, but I felt like a ghost. Gabriel took the lead, moving with a predator's grace despite his injury. We reached the French doors of the study. The glass was broken near the handle. We stepped inside. The room smelled of cigar smoke and copper. District Attorney Harper was sitting in his leather chair. He was tied up, duct tape over his mouth, his eyes wide with terror. And standing behind him, leaning casually against the bookshelf, was a man. He was huge, wearing a tactical vest and holding a suppressed submachine gun. He wasn't alone. 3 other men stepped out from the shadows of the room, their laser sights dancing across our chests. "Welcome," the leader said. He had a thick Russian accent and a scar running down his cheek. "Mrs. Sterling said you might be stubborn enough to show up." Gabriel raised his gun, but 4 red dots settled on his chest instantly. "Drop it, Mr. Stone," the leader smiled, showing gold teeth. "Or the pretty lady gets a new hole in her head." Gabriel hesitated. He looked at me. He looked at the gun. "Drop it," I whispered. Gabriel slowly placed the pistol on the floor and kicked it away. "Smart," the leader nodded. "Now, the blueprints. Hand them over." I clutched the roll of papers to my chest. "If I give them to you, you kill us anyway. If you give them to me, I kill you quickly." The leader shrugged. "If you don't, well, I have a very creative imagination, and Mrs. Sterling pays a bonus for suffering." He took a step toward me. "Wait," Gabriel said, stepping in front of me. "You're Blackwatch, right mercenaries. You work for the highest bidder." "We are professionals," the leader scoffed. "We have a contract." Victoria Sterling is paying you what, 50,000 a hundred? Gabriel asked, his voice steady. I have an offshore account with $10 million in bearer bonds. It's yours. Just walk away. The other mercenaries exchanged glances. 10 million was retirement money. The leader paused. Greed flickered in his eyes. Show me. It's on my phone. Gabriel reached slowly into his pocket. Slowly, the leader barked, raising his weapon. Gabriel pulled out the phone. He tapped the screen. But he didn't open a bank app. He hit play on a pre-recorded audio file. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the phone's speaker. Not Gabriel's voice. It was Victoria Sterling's voice. My son is a liability. Make it look like a suicide. Silence them all. It was the recording from the hospital room. Leo must have bugged the room remotely when he hacked the hospital feed. The leader frowned. What is this? This, Gabriel said, is a live stream, broadcasting directly to the NYPD dispatch, the FBI field office, and the New York Times news desk. The leader's face went pale. You're bluffing. Check the timestamp. Gabriel smirked. You are currently starring in a federal wiretap investigation, if you pull that trigger. You aren't just hitmen. You are cop killers on a live feed. The room went deadly silent. The mercenaries looked at their phones. Notifications were blowing up. Sirens began to wail in the distance, real sirens this time. Lots of them. We have to go. One of the men hissed. Boss, this is heat we don't need. The leader looked at Gabriel with pure hatred. He knew he had been played, but he also knew the math. This isn't over. The leader spat. He signaled his men. Move out back door. They lowered their weapons and sprinted toward the exit, abandoning the DA. I rushed to DA Harper and ripped the tape off his mouth. The blueprints. I shoved the papers into his trembling hands. It's all here. Victoria Sterling ordered the fire. She tried to kill us. The DA gasped for air, looking at the papers, then at the retreating mercenaries. You crazy bitch. You brought a war to my house. I brought you the case of the century, I said, grabbing a letter opener from his desk to cut his bonds. Now, are you going to prosecute? Or do I have to live stream your corruption next? DA Harper looked at me. He saw the blood on my face, the fire in my eyes. He nodded slowly. I'll issue the warrant, he whispered, tonight. I turned to Gabriel to celebrate. But Gabriel wasn't celebrating. He was leaning against the bookshelf, sliding slowly down to the floor. The adrenaline dump had finished him. His eyes were rolling back. Gabriel. I dropped to my knees beside him. Did we win? He whispered, his voice barely audible. We won, I cried, pressing my hands to his face. Stay with me, Gabriel. The ambulance is coming. He smiled weakly. Good, because I think I'm done. His head fell forward. He stopped moving. No, I screamed, shaking him. Gabriel, wake up. The sirens grew louder, filling the room with blue and red light. But my world was turning black. The flashing lights of the ambulance painted the Hamptons' night in a chaotic rhythm of red and white. Inside, the world was a blur of frantic motion and shouting. BP is dropping 60 over 40. We're losing him. I sat huddled in the corner of the ambulance, my knees pulled to my chest, watching the paramedic compress Gabriel's chest. His shirt, the expensive tuxedo shirt he wore to conquer an empire, was cut open, revealing the charred, ugly wound I had burned into his flesh. It wasn't enough. The infection had set in. The blood loss was too great. Gabriel, fight, I whispered, gripping the metal rail of the stretcher until my knuckles turned white. You promised. You said we save each other. He didn't answer. The heart monitor let out a long, high-pitched whine that sounded like a scream in the cramped space. Flatline charging paddles clear. Thump! His body arched off the gurney. I flinched, a sob tearing from my throat. Again, clear. Thump. We have a rhythm sinus tachycardia. Let's move, driver. Step on it. The ambulance roared, tearing down the highway toward the city. I looked out the back window. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in blood-orange hues. It was a new day. And, for Victoria Sterling, it was the last day. At 6:00 a.m., the Upper East Side was usually quiet, but today, East 64th Street looked like a war zone. FBI armored trucks blocked both ends of the street. A helicopter hovered low overhead, its rotor wash whipping the manicured trees of the Sterling townhouse into a frenzy. Inside the master bedroom, Victoria Sterling was frantically shoving diamonds into a Hermes Birkin bag. Her hands, usually so steady when signing death warrants, were shaking uncontrollably. She could hear the sirens. She could hear the bullhorn. Victoria Sterling, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands up. No, she hissed, grabbing her passport. They can't touch me. I am a Sterling. I own the mayor. She ran to the secret elevator behind her walk-in closet. It led to a tunnel connected to the subway system, the same tunnel system her son had used to escape. Ironically, she pressed the button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Click, click. The panel lit up, but instead of the elevator arriving, a voice came through the intercom. Access denied. Grandmother. Victoria froze. Who is this? The statistical anomaly. Leo's voice was calm, filtering through the speaker. I locked the building's management system. All exits are sealed. The temperature in your room is currently being lowered to 50 degrees. Have a nice day. You little brat! Victoria screamed, pounding on the wall. Open this door. Boom! The front door of the townhouse exploded inward. Federal agents, go, go, go. Victoria ran back to the bedroom window. She looked down. 50 SWAT officers were swarming her garden. The press was there too. Hundreds of cameras. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. They were all pointing up at her window. She was trapped, like a rat in a diamond-studded cage. Her bedroom door splintered open. FBI, get on the ground. Victoria didn't get on the ground. She stood tall, straightening her silk robe. She lifted her chin. Do you know who I am? She demanded, her voice dripping with venom. I will have your badges for this. I will sue your entire department. A female agent stepped forward. She didn't look impressed. She holstered her weapon and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Victoria Sterling, the agent said, spinning Victoria around and slamming her face first into the antique vanity table. You are under arrest for the murder of 20 patients at Sunset Hills, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Click, click. The cold steel bit into her wrists, for the first time in her life. Victoria screamed, not in anger, but in pure, animalistic terror. In room 304 of Mount Sinai Hospital, Richard Sterling woke up to the sound of the TV. He blinked, his chest throbbing with pain. A nurse was changing his IV bag. She was watching the news, shaking her head. Look at that, she muttered. They say she killed 20 old people for a condo project. Sick. Richard turned his head weakly toward the screen. The image was shaky. It showed his mother, the Iron Lady, the Queen of New York, being dragged out of her townhouse in handcuffs. Her hair was a mess. She was screaming at the camera, looking insane. Downfall of the Sterling dynasty, the reporter was saying. Evidence provided by a whistleblower suggests a decades-long cover-up. Richard watched as an agent shoved Victoria's head down to put her into the back of a police cruiser. The door slammed shut. Richard closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out. It's over, he whispered. He was alive. He was free. But as he looked around the empty hospital room, He realized the cost. No wife, no son, no mother, no company. He was finally the sole heir to the Sterling name, and the name was worth zero. At 9:00 a.m., the lobby of New York Presbyterian Hospital was a circus. Reporters were camped out, waiting for news on the billionaire beggar who had been shot. The automatic doors opened. I stepped out. I hadn't showered. I was still wearing the ruined black suit, now stiff with dried blood mine and Gabriel's. My hair was wild. I looked like a survivor of a shipwreck. The cameras flashed blindingly. "Ms. Vance, is Gabriel Stone alive? Did you really steal the evidence? What is your relationship with the district attorney?" I walked to the podium set up by the hospital administration. I gripped the sides of it to stop my hands from shaking. I looked out at the sea of microphones. "My name is Elena Vance," I said. My voice was raspy, exhausted, but it carried across the silence that fell over the room. Last night, an attempt was made on my life, and on the life of Gabriel Stone, the man who saved my son when this city threw us in the trash. I paused, looking directly into the lens of the nearest camera. "Victoria Sterling is in custody. The evidence of her crime's murder. Arson. Fraud is now with the district attorney. The Sterling empire was built on blood. And today, we tore it down." "What about the company?" a reporter shouted. "Thousands of employees are worried about their jobs." "The company," I said, my voice hardening, "is now under the majority ownership of Stone Industries. We are not firing anyone, but we are purging the board. We are releasing the patents. Sterling Pharma will no longer profit from suffering. We will cure people, not extort them." "And Mr. Stone?" another reporter asked softly. "How is he?" I looked down. I thought of Gabriel lying on the operating table upstairs. The surgeons had been working for 4 hours. They said the sepsis was the real killer. Gabriel Stone. I choked back a sob, forcing myself to be strong. "Is the toughest man I know. He is fighting. And if you have any respect for the man who liberated your healthcare system today, you will let him fight in peace." I turned and walked away. I didn't answer any more questions. I needed to get back to the waiting room. The waiting room was empty except for one small figure. Leo. He was sitting in a plastic chair, his legs not touching the ground. He was holding a Rubik's Cube, solving it over and over again. Click, clack, click, clack. "Leo," I whispered. He looked up. He dropped the cube. He ran to me. I fell to my knees and hugged him. He buried his face in my neck. He was trembling. "Is he dead?" Leo asked. His voice was small. The probability of survival was low. "Mom." I did the math. "Math doesn't know everything." I kissed his head, tears streaming down my face. "Math doesn't know Gabriel." The double doors to the surgical wing swung open. A surgeon walked out. He pulled off his surgical cap. He looked exhausted. He had blood on his scrubs. I stood up, holding Leo's hand. I couldn't breathe. The surgeon looked at me. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. "Ms. Vance," he said. "Tell me," I demanded. "Just tell me." "He lost a lot of blood." The surgeon said slowly. "We had to remove a section of the artery and graft a vein from his leg." His heart stopped twice on the table. My knees buckled. Leo held me up. "But..." The surgeon took a deep breath. "He's stubborn. We got a pulse. He's in a coma, induced to let his body heal. But he's alive." I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Can I see him?" "He won't hear you." "He'll hear me," I said fiercely. "He always hears me." I walked past the surgeon, into the ICU. Gabriel lay in the bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hissed. He looked pale, almost translucent. Tubes ran into his arms and throat. But the monitor showed a green line. Beep, beep, beep. Steady, strong. I walked to the bedside. I took his hand, the hand that had pulled me out of the snow, the hand that had held a gun to defend me. You can't sleep forever, billionaire, I whispered, leaning down to kiss his forehead. We have a company to run, and I don't know the password to the server. I pulled a chair up to the bed. Leo climbed up onto the chair next to me. He placed his small hand over Gabriel's. I will calculate the optimal recovery trajectory, Leo stated seriously to the unconscious man. You just need to wake up. We sat there, a broken family forged in fire, waiting for the king to open his eyes. The Manhattan Supreme Court was a fortress of granite and mahogany, but today it felt more like a gladiator arena. The air conditioning was humming, yet the courtroom was stifling, packed with reporters, victims' families, and the ghosts of the Sterling legacy. I sat in the front row, holding Gabriel's hand. He was still using a cane, his movement slightly stiff, but he looked every inch the titan of industry in his charcoal suit. Leo sat between us, wearing a miniature tie, his eyes scanning the jury box like he was calculating the probability of a guilty verdict. All rise, the bailiff boomed. Judge Harrison, a woman known as the Hammer for her ruthlessness with white-collar criminals, swept in. Bring in the defendant. The side door opened. Victoria Sterling walked in. She wasn't wearing the orange jumpsuit. Her high-priced lawyers had argued for her right to wear civilian clothes. She wore a modest gray suit. No jewelry. Her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She didn't look like the monster who burned down a nursing home. She looked like a fragile, confused grandmother. She walked with a slight tremble, clutching a tissue. It was a performance, a masterclass in manipulation. Your Honor, Victoria's defense attorney, a man named Sterling, no relation, but expensive enough to be one, stood up. My client pleads not guilty by reason of diminished capacity. We have psychiatric evaluation stating Mrs. Sterling has been suffering from early-onset dementia for decades. She was not in control of her actions. She was confused. A ripple of outrage went through the courtroom. Confused, Gabriel whispered, his grip tightening on his cane. She calculated the insurance payout to the penny. Order, Judge Harrison banged her gavel. Mr. Prosecutor, your opening statement. District Attorney Harper stood up. He looked at me and nodded. We will prove, Your Honor, that Victoria Sterling was not confused. She was calculating, cold, and entirely lucid, and we have the witness to prove it. Call your first witness. The people call Richard Sterling. The courtroom doors opened. Richard walked in. He looked healthier than the last time I saw him. The tan from working outdoors, he didn't get the bookstore job. He was working in a community garden in Queens suited him. He walked to the stand, ignoring his mother's gaze. Victoria stared at him. Her fragile grandmother mask slipped for a second, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. Mr. Sterling, Harper began, can you identify the signature on this document authorizing the fire safety cuts at Sunset Hills? It looks like mine, Richard said into the microphone, but I didn't sign it. Objection. The defense lawyer jumped up. Hearsay. I didn't sign it. Richard continued, his voice rising. Because on the date that document was signed, October 12th, 1994, I was in a hospital in Switzerland, recovering from a skiing accident. My right arm was broken. I couldn't write. He pulled a faded medical record from his pocket. Here's the admission log. The jury murmured. The defense lawyer deflated. Mr. Sterling, Harper continued. Did your mother ever speak to you about the fire? Richard looked at Victoria. She was glaring at him, silently mouthing the word traitor. She told me, Richard said, his voice trembling slightly, then steadying. That poor people are just overhead costs. She said that sometimes you have to burn the weeds to grow the flowers. Liar! Victoria shrieked, standing up. I gave you everything, you ungrateful wretch, I made you. You made me a monster, Richard shouted back, tears welling in his eyes. But I'm done being your puppet. Mother, I'm cutting the strings. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison banged the gavel furiously. Sit down, Mrs. Sterling, or I will have you bound and gagged. Victoria sank back into her chair, breathing heavily. Her act was broken. The jury had seen the shark beneath the skin. The people call Elena Vance. I stood up. I squeezed Gabriel's hand one last time and walked to the stand. I swore on the Bible. I looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people. Ms. Vance, Harper asked. You were married to Richard Sterling. You lived in that house. Did you see signs of dementia? I saw signs of evil, I said calmly. Victoria Sterling remembered every penny I spent on groceries. She remembered the birthday of every senator she bribed. She remembered the exact chemical composition of the drugs her company watered down to save money. I turned to look at Victoria. She isn't sick, I said. She's just a sociopath who got caught. Ms. Vance. The defense attorney stood up, trying to salvage the wreck. You are biased. You are angry because she exposed your infidelity. My infidelity. I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. You mean the fact that she stole my husband's genetic material and replaced it with a stranger's to humiliate me? Yes. I am angry, but not for myself. I pointed to Leo in the front row. I am angry for him. She called my son a mongrel. She tried to throw him out into the snow to die because his DNA wasn't pure enough. That is not dementia. That is eugenics. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Eugenics. The jury looked at Victoria with disgust. The closing arguments were short. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman stood up. He didn't look at Victoria. Have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the count of arson in the first degree. Guilty. On the count of 20 counts of manslaughter. Guilty. On the count of attempted murder of Richard Sterling. Guilty. Victoria didn't scream this time. She sat frozen, staring at the wall. The reality was crashing down. The penthouse, the galas, the power. It was all gone. Victoria Sterling, Judge Harrison said, removing her glasses. You have treated human life as a commodity. You have shown no remorse. You have attempted to manipulate this court. The judge leaned forward. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 100 years. The gavel slammed down. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot. It sounded like freedom. 2 bailiffs moved in. They pulled Victoria up. Richard, she screamed, twisting in their grip. Richard, help me. I'm your mother. Don't let them take me. Richard stood in the aisle. He watched her. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched until the side doors closed and her screams faded into silence. Then, he turned to me. He nodded once, a silent goodbye, and walked out of the courtroom. A free man for the first time in 40 years. Outside on the courthouse steps, the sun was shining. The air smelled of spring. The snow had finally melted. Reporters swarmed, but Gabriel held up a hand, silencing them. The verdict speaks for itself. Gabriel said, Justice has been served. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a company to rebuild. He put his arm around my waist. I leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. So, I looked up at him. What now, Mr. Chairman? Now, Gabriel smiled, looking down at Leo, who was busy critiquing the courthouse architecture on his tablet. Now we go get ice cream. Leo says my glucose levels are low. Statistically, Leo piped up, Ice cream increases dopamine levels by 45%. It is a logical celebration strategy. I laughed. A real, unburdened laugh. We walked down the steps. Three misfits who had taken on the world and won. The nightmare was over. The dream was just beginning. 5 years later. The auditorium of the United Nations in Geneva was packed. Heads of state, Nobel laureates, and tech billionaires sat in hushed anticipation. And now, the announcer's voice echoed. To present the Global Humanitarian Award, please welcome the CEO of Stone Vance Industries, Elena Stone. I walked onto the stage. The blinding lights didn't scare me anymore. I wasn't wearing armor today. I was wearing a simple white dress, symbolizing the transparency we had brought to the pharmaceutical industry. 5 years ago, I began, my voice steady. A boy was told he was statistically insignificant because of his DNA. He was told his life wasn't worth the cost of a heart valve. I looked down at the front row. Leo was there. He was 10 years old now, wearing a sharp tuxedo and typing on a holographic tablet. He didn't look up. He was likely optimizing the building's energy grid out of boredom, but he smiled. A small, genuine smile. Today, I continued, that boy is the youngest lead engineer in history, and thanks to his design, the Vance valve has saved 50,000 children in developing nations, at zero cost to their families. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite clapping, it was a roar of approval. I looked to the side of the stage. Gabriel was standing there, holding a sleeping toddler in his arms. Our daughter, Maya. She had his dark hair and my stubborn chin. Gabriel caught my eye. He winked. The man who used to live in a bunker, who hated the world, was now the face of its salvation. After the ceremony, we took the private jet back to New York, but we didn't go straight to the penthouse. Can we stop in Queens? Leo asked, looking up from his tablet. I want to show him the award. Of course, Gabriel said, putting a hand on Leo's shoulder. He'd like that. The black SUV pulled up to a small, colorful shop on a quiet street. The sign read, Richard's Rare Books and Botany. The bell jingled as we walked in. The smell of old paper and fresh potting soil filled the air. It was cozy, peaceful. Richard Sterling was on a ladder, arranging ferns on a high shelf. He wore a canvas apron and reading glasses. His hair was gray now, thinning. But the tension that used to line his face was gone. He looked normal. Hello, Richard, I said. He turned. He almost dropped a fern. He climbed down slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. Elena, he smiled warmly. Gabriel. And, is that the man of the year? He looked at Leo. There was no resentment in his eyes anymore, only a quiet pride for the boy he once rejected. I brought you this, Leo said, handing Richard a replica of the award. Statistically, you contributed to this outcome by testifying. So, you deserve 0.5% of the credit. Richard laughed. A real laugh. I'll take it. Thank you. Leo. He placed the award on the counter, next to a picture of him and his new wife, a librarian he had met at the community center. How is she? Richard asked, his voice lowering. He meant Victoria. Still appealing, Gabriel said dryly. And still losing. She runs the prison laundry service now, apparently. She's very efficient. Good, Richard nodded. She always liked clean linens. We didn't stay long. As we left, Richard called out, Elena. I turned back. Thank you, he said softly, for destroying my life. It was the only way I could find a real one. I smiled. You're welcome, Richard. That evening, on the terrace of our new home, a restored brownstone in Brooklyn, far away from the cold glass tower of the Sterling mansion, Gabriel and I stood watching the sunset over the Manhattan skyline. Maya was asleep. Leo was in his room, probably hacking NASA to check the weather on Mars. Gabriel wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "I ran the numbers again today." "What numbers?" "Nerd," I teased, leaning back into him. "The probability of the sperm swap happening, the nurse making the switch. You staying for 5 years, me being in that exact alley when you were thrown out. And 1 in a billion, Gabriel said, mathematically impossible. He turned me around to face him. His eyes, once so cold and empty, were full of warmth. "They called Leo a mistake," Gabriel whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "They called the swap a crime. But looking at you, looking at our family, it was the greatest glitch in the system." "It wasn't a glitch," I said, pulling him down for a kiss. "It was an upgrade." Below us, the city lights flickered on, one by one. But we didn't need the city anymore. We had built our own world, not on bloodlines or bank accounts, but on the unbreakable code of survival and love. And for the first time in my life, the future didn't look scary. It looked infinite.